We're good.
I'm pretty sure we're live.
Yep. Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Parker. This is Chris Nishihara. We're with the Ishihara and Parker Law Firm here in Longview, Texas. This is our holiday edition of how to handle estate planning with our parents. Kind of situations we were to talk about are things that you might be able to address as you guys come together for the holidays. It is a perfect opportunity to cover these topics, no doubt. Kristen,
Merry Christmas.
what are we talking about? That's right.
Well, we just find that, overall, only about 50% of people have wills. And most of us are not inclined to ask, primarily we're going to talk about parents, but this could really apply to any loved one in that situation.
Yeah.
But most of us are not geared to say, hey, Mom, Merry Christmas. Do you have your will done? And it's not a great, comfortable conversation. And the reason we're going to encourage you to maybe explore some ways to do that, think about it, is just going to be that I promise your parents want to make it as easy for you as possible. They don't want to bring it up to you, but it's probably going to be a conversation that they aren't as scared to have as you might think. Now, you know your family better than we do.
Yep.
Some people don't want to tell you anything, don't want you to know anything, and that's your life. That's where you are. You can't do anything about it. But we'd like to give you some general ideas on how to approach it, and if you do, what sort of information you need.
Yeah, we've seen some folks will come in and say, hey, my parents, my family, they just will not discuss death. They cannot handle end of life. And that's tough because I promise you the burden of handling it will fall on the same person who's thinking of these questions.
And they are going to die.
And yeah, they will pass away and it will fall to you and it will be complicated and hard. Other folks, I think Kristen's right. They are wanting to make it easier for the kids. They are able to handle this topic, but they'll start off with, it's all done, just check the safe. Or it's all done, look in the folder. And I would say that of those times I've heard that, I've had many kids come in talking about their parents, and they said, Mom says, don't worry about it, it's all done. Mom passes away, they go to that folder, they go to that safe, and it's empty.
Right.
That plays out over and over again.
And sometimes that's just an honest misunderstanding. Mom thought everything was taken care of, maybe thought she didn't need a will, maybe thought what she did at home was fine. So we're just hoping to get to the point where you know that Mom is fine.
Right. Because if your mom or dad may feel that way, have they moved? Have they sold or bought things? I mean, I've had people say it's in the dresser, but we got rid of the dresser. So these are the things that you as an adult child will like to get ahead of because it will certainly run you over later.
I had one this week. She'd asked her aunt who had no children, if she had her estate planning in place, and aunt had said, yeah, I got a will. And then a decade later said, no, I just lied. I didn't. It's like, well, that was honest.
Yeah.
But so tough part, I think, is how do you bring it up? So, we're all together for the holidays, or maybe I'm seeing my parents or whatever's happening. How do you actually bring up that conversation, do you suppose?
Yeah, at least what I hear from the most of the folks who have had these conversations, I don't think it's a large group setting. Usually it's the adult children, right? We don't need the grandkids running around, nephews and nieces. This is an intimate gathering. You know your family best, but if you know that your mom or dad is mature and able to handle it, you grab the siblings, you get together, and I think you start off with the basics. Hey, Mom, Dad, we all love you, and we want to make sure we follow your wishes. Do you have a plan? Right? Do you have a plan? I would just start with that, and that would branch off into, yeah, I have a plan. You get this, and you get that, and that's just how the way I feel, and you all know it, which is not a plan. But at least you get them thinking that way, and then you try to locate or identify the important documents.
Yeah, and I think there's two separate approaches here that you would need to decide based on your family. I think one is a direct question, like, do you have this? I think another way to kind of ease into the conversation more, depending upon your family, is to talk about a situation that maybe you've seen.
Yeah.
So a lot of times our clients are coming in to get their estate planning done because they have been through the death of a loved one and they've seen what that looks like. They don't want to leave that burden to their kids, or they want to sort it out so it's taken care of. So a lot of times this topic comes up once someone has had that experience. So maybe you have a friend that's lost a spouse or a parent or a loved one, and you've seen what they've gone through. Talking about that to your parent initially, just, hey, I have this friend, she lost her husband, turned out she wasn't a joint owner on the bank account, or they'd forgotten to do a will, or this situation happened, it was very difficult for her. Is that stuff that you guys have done? I think you can kind of ease into it by talking about, here's a situation that I've seen, I'd like us to avoid that situation, and talk about what they have in place for it.
So we're looking at either the direct approach, simply saying, hey, mom, dad, we're all together. We're kind of in the planning what's going to happen. Can you tell us what your wishes are and have you cover that in some way? Or you lead into it more gently, some hypotheticals, some examples. You're not trying to scare your mom and dad. What you're trying to do is let them know that, unfortunately, the laws of Texas are rigid. And unless they have taken steps, there can be complications, which happens. We see them all the time up here, and almost all of those are avoidable.
Yeah, I think one other good way to do it is ask them about their experience.
Yeah.
So mom and dad have probably lost a parent. What was their experience at the time? Were they an executor? Did everything go very easily? You know, you probably weren't aware of or involved in that situation. So maybe asking them about their experience and then asking how they've got their plan set up. What does your plan look like then?
And a lot of times, if you are a traditional Texas family, mom and dad were married for 50 years and they had 2 kids, when husband passed away, mom may have done nothing, right? And that was maybe okay for mom, but everyone has to understand we're all in different roles and have different issues that will happen. It's easier for a surviving spouse to do nothing than maybe for the adult children. So that's one thing that mom or dad, like, oh, husband passed away. I was super sad. I handled the grief, but estate planning was no problem at all. So y'all should have no problem. And that is a misconception.
That's exactly right.
You just need to get mom past that. Say, well, mom, you're probably right, but let's explore this.
That's exactly
because
right.
we have seen surprises.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, a spouse can be lulled into thinking everything is fine because everything went fine for them
that's
because
right.
they were a joint owner. They own the house through community property, but then that's going to be very different for the kids. That's exactly right. Yeah. Kids are going to have to sell that house. They probably will need an executor or think about a revocable trust. They will need those beneficiaries updated. Yes, absolutely. Sometimes we, assume it will be as easy as it was.
And of course, the other really, really hard topic to cover in this is and this is common. As we get older, we know sometimes we lose siblings as well. And then in that one, you totally just have to talk to mom and dad about it. But you need to find out how they want to handle the children of any brother or sister who's passed away. And that's delicate, y'all. We're not trying to make it difficult for you, but how often are you actually all together in a setting with mom who's going to have 100% of your attention, and you can take care of this opportunity? I mean, they come once a year, and this is one of those times y'all really should consider locking it down.
Yeah, and of course, again, depends on family dynamics, right? Does everybody get along? Do they want to leave everything equally to everybody? We're making a couple of assumptions
Right.
here that the family is one where you could all come together and have that conversation. Because, of course, mom and dad don't have to leave it to you. They don't have to leave it equally. They can
Whatever
give
they
you,
want.
Yeah, that's
Whatever they want.
up to them. But Chris makes a good point. If you have a deceased child or sibling or a disabled child or sibling, that is a conversation absolutely that needs to happen because they do need to take steps. And I think a lot of times people are frozen with not knowing what to do, where to go. So a lot of our clients are driven in by children that have recognized, seen on Facebook or seen somewhere on TikTok, this is something that needs to happen for mom and dad, so let's go together to get this done. So you can really, you can be a very important factor in making sure that they get their estate plan done the way they want it, which is the goal. We want what they want to happen to effectively happen at their death.
And another thing to think about too is I've seen a lot of parents come in, and I'm assuming it's a traditional family where no one's fighting, where they're just splitting everything among the kids. But when it comes to personal property, sometimes, I love my kids, they can split the house, I don't care about that. But I certainly care about the family Bible, the photo album, the knickknacks, the porcelain cats, whatever it may be. I have a lot of folks who have acquired things that are very important to them, but they either think their kids don't care because no one's ever discussed
Sometimes
it.
they don't.
And sometimes they don't. Never discussed it. Or 2, have been too embarrassed or shy to bring it up. But if there's things that you and your siblings all want, or it's important to your parents, a rocking chair, antiques, it would be great to knock that stuff out. Like, hey, Sally's always wanted this bed frame, and she had memories of growing up. And Jimmy's always wanted this gun from Grandpa. There's things that y'all can take care of in a constructive way. And what I like about these conversations is you are setting expectations for the family. Like, everyone's together, everyone knows mom's wishes, and everyone's going to honor them. Yeah. And that is the best way to honor their legacies.
I totally agree. I do think that personal property is several steps down the line. So I would caution, don't let not knowing who the family ring is going to go to of 3 daughters and 6 granddaughters frees you from making that estate plan. Your will can be there. It can say what it needs to say. You can have everything else set up, and personal property, because it's usually the most sensitive.
It is.
And it sometimes stops people from doing the major things they need to do when they're frozen about that personal property item because they can't decide and they don't want to pick. Fine, don't pick. Leave that till the very end, but get everything else done, because you can get everything else done and through a personal property memo decide way later on who's going to get that ring, which I would love for you to have that conversation with everybody. But if you don't, still do the other stuff.
Start with the big things, work your way
Yes.
down.
Yes, please.
Other one of my favorite ones is they'll say, "Oh yeah, I've got my stuff done. It's in that dresser." I would recommend you go look in that dresser and see if you can verify, because I've had many people bring in unsigned wills, copies of wills, drafts of wills. You know, I mean, clients. We're not. I mean, very few of you are actually attorneys that handle probates, and your parents less so. So these things happen. Maybe they saw the attorney never followed up. Maybe the original is lost. These are the things that you want to get settled while you can.
Yeah, absolutely. So question number 1, do you have a last will and testament?
Yep.
Yes or no? And then the follow-up question immediately is, can I see a copy? Now we have to be careful about that because you don't need to know what their wishes are. You don't need to know who the beneficiaries are. The point of getting a copy is to see if a lawyer can confirm that it's a valid will.
Yeah.
You by yourself probably cannot do that.
Yeah.
I would suggest that Chris and I would be willing to review a will if you emailed it to us, and we'd tell you if it's valid. So if that's something you need to do, you can take it to a lawyer, you can send it to a lawyer and say, is this a valid will, without you reading it at all? And that would be fine, again, depending upon the dynamics of your family.
Yeah.
But what you need to be able to do is confirm that it's a valid will. Some red flags would be, it's handwritten. That's a red flag.
Yeah.
They've done it on their own, and you see typewriting and handwritten.
Yeah.
It's 3 pages or less. These are some red flags that they probably did it on their own, and it may not be done completely. Obviously, it has to be signed.
Yeah, the generation before us was very frugal, and I've seen many of them attempt to copy, I guess, other wills. I mean, just this week, I saw one that the family all thought was a will, but was 100% not a will.
Yep.
I mean, I read through it. First off, it didn't make a lot of sense in different sections, so if it was a will, we were going to have tremendous problems. But at the end of it, I realized this is not a valid will, and now it's a real mess. It's, you know, blended families, multiple things going on, and now no one's in charge. And
Right. So the point of seeing the will is not so you know what it says, but to confirm
Yeah.
that it's valid. So maybe, Mom, can we take this to a lawyer and make sure that it's valid? Not, can I see a copy? Maybe that's a better way to say that.
Or Mom, can you go see the lawyer and show it to them? If that is, because honestly, it's whatever they want. It's their wishes. But if they don't do the will correctly,
They've not gotten their wishes accomplished.
That's right.
That's the problem. That's what Mom needs to know. We're just trying to make sure that her wishes get accomplished the correct way.
That's
You
right.
also need to know where the original is being held and have access to it.
absolutely.
So wherever the original wet signature will is, that is a document the executor will need to probate when Mom passes. So you do need to know where it is, and somebody needs to have access to it.
Favorite answer? It's in the safe deposit box. And then, of course, no one has access to that safe deposit box when your loved one passes away, and then it becomes a big brouhaha all over again.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, good times.
Yeah.
So number 1, ask if there is a will. What are some other things that I might need to ask? If so, I think also just advice-wise, you know, if you're doing a direct, everybody's together, we're having this conversation, absolutely do all this at one time.
Yeah.
If you're having a kind of indirect, hey Mom, what are our wishes? Do you have this?
Yeah.
Can we make sure it's valid? Maybe we don't need to hit all these at the same time.
don't want to overwhelm them.
Right. Because the goal is it's not about you. It is not about you as the child. This is for Mom and Dad. This is their stuff. If you don't get any of it,
Right.
tough break. That's their decision. That's their stuff to spend during lifetime. The goal is, Mom, I care about you, and I want to make sure that, 1, you are provided for during lifetime, and that at your death, your wishes are accomplished.
Yep.
So we're also assuming that you're a good kid and you have the right intentions here, because otherwise, none of this is your business.
Yes, sir. If we are looking for other documents, and I know this isn't maybe the focus of what we're talking about, but if you're having the home run conversation of your life with your parents, and you've got this wills, or we're making progress on the wills, you of course need to cover other important documents,
Yeah.
which at the top of the list have got to be those powers of attorney. Maybe that's not how you start it, but those documents need to be done for the simple fact, if you are a reliable, good child or children, you can take care of Mom and Dad without the government ever being involved in their lives with those powers of attorney.
Absolutely. And the thing to remember here is that we want these conversations to be early.
Yes.
So that's why we're talking about this as a holiday edition. That's why, even though it may not be super fun to get together and talk about these things, that's why you have to do it now while mom and dad have the capacity to have this conversation with you. If you wait until they've had a diagnosis of something, they're ill with something, they've had a stroke and they're in the hospital, now the crisis is immediate.
Right.
They may not have the ability to sign those documents. Now we can't be sure what their real wishes were back when they had the capacity to have these conversations with you. So start these conversations early, and if you have to ease into them, just have a little bit for a long time. That's absolutely fine, but please start early.
Yep, absolutely. You find them, you get the topic done, you find out what's actually done, you put it together, get on the same page with mom and dad, or at least make sure they're on whatever page they need to be, and then you make sure you can find the original documents when needed by the people who need them.
Yep. Some other really good information to have, if you were so inclined to get it, would be, where do mom and dad bank?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There's probably not one bank. There's probably multiple banks. So just, you don't need to know how much is in their accounts. That's none of your business. But knowing that they have this bank and this bank and this bank will be very helpful if you need to access that information, and eventually you will.
Yeah, it's kind of morbid. So sometimes I'll talk to parents. They'll come in, we'll do their documents, and I'll say, listen, here's your wills, here's your powers of attorney. These are good, important documents that help you, but there's nothing in here that's state secrets, no social security numbers, or there's nothing like that. But if it was me, I would consider what I call, it's terrible, I call it a death guide. I would make a piece of paper, you can do it in writing, you can type it up. I would put down every account number you have and at what bank. I would consider putting down your contact. I'd even consider putting down account numbers and passwords. I would do my investments. I'd put down the insurance agent, the life insurance agent, the funeral home. Everything that I've told my kids for the last 40 years will be forgotten by those children when your loved one passes away. It's just how we handle grief. And the children will have to go through your mail for as long as they can, looking for annual statements and updating. But if you put it all in a list, now, this is important. You do not want this stolen, obviously, but if you put it all together, it'll help children out tremendously upon your passing.
Yeah, and you can absolutely put any instructions you want there, any extra information. But yeah, having a place to start is incredibly helpful, because if something happens unexpected, your kids don't know where your bank account is. There's, they
checking, saving, CD, I don't know. Yeah, right.
They are starting from zero. So anything you can do to help them would be very much appreciated. So what Chris is saying is, this is a list that you sit down and make, or ask mom to make.
Yep.
Can you make me this list, so that I know where to start if need be.
Yep.
And I think one other good point that you've made before is about spouses. So if one spouse generally handles the business.
Oh, yes, that's true. I mean, how often, how we divide and conquer, right? So maybe maybe the husband's handled all the investments and the wife's handled the local checking account. Well, I promise you, when the husband passes away, the wife will have no idea where anything's at. On the reverse of that, the husband may know where all the 401ks are, but he cannot balance a checkbook. And when mom passes away, he's not going to know where any of that stuff is or how to handle it. How to order more checks? Where are the checks? These are the reasons you want to get these finances together, because oftentimes the surviving spouse is not in a position emotionally, intellectually, experience-wise to handle this sudden large change. And so if you can lay it all out, you make the spouse's job doable, and you make the kid's job, if they are in that situation, much more clean. Who has the house insurance? I mean, these are questions.
Yeah.
Who's our agent? There's no 1-800 number to call to get all this information. It's literally you're a detective waiting for mail, going through your memory, calling up your brother and sister, like, hey, did you take them to a bank? It's really tough on families.
Yeah, and absolutely. And as people age, they remember less to tell you, and they may just not have the ability to do it, or they may pass away before they've told you. So absolutely, knowing the bank, knowing the financial advisor, knowing the CPA, knowing the insurance broker, knowing all the people that are involved professionally in mom and dad's lives, so that if you needed to step in and help while they were alive but incapacitated, you could do it. Or when they do pass away, you can step in and notify the people that need to be notified. And again, this is probably if you are their agent, you're their executor, you're the person that they want to handle those things, or you and a sibling are, you can tag team that, but they're going to need somebody to handle that business for them. So whoever that person is needs to know that information.
Absolutely. What you got?
Yeah. Well, again, just a reminder, it's not about you. Enter these conversations with love, with empathy. Some people are very sensitive to talking about death, so we in no way want to diminish feelings or emotions that come up with that. We just want to encourage you to have open and honest dialogue with loved ones about things that hopefully will ensure that you or whoever's supposed to do it is able to carry out their wishes when they pass away, or if they were to become incapacitated, that you could step in and help them with what they needed.
Yep. It's the holiday season. We want you guys to have a great time seeing the families, but honestly, the peace of mind that you can give your loved ones, knowing that there's not going to be issues, that things will happen just the way they want, in the end would be a very good outcome.
Right. 100% of our clients say that putting the estate plan in place lifted a huge burden from their shoulders.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, because we give them that practical advice. Here's how these things are going to go. This is what the kids are going to need to do. And they think, I feel so much better. I don't know why I waited so long to do this.
Got a plan? Now it's up to them. That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
That's right.
We're glad to be here and answer any questions you guys have. So thanks for joining us.
Bye, y'all.